Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the podcast. I'm excited to be here with you today, all by myself this week. I don't have one of my kids helping me with my intro like I did last week. So last week we talked about being in the growth edge and using our intuition as parents to figure out how to parent in a way that helps our kids be in their growth edge and doesn't go too far out into the stratosphere and like beyond their pay grade and stuff like that, using our intuition. And I felt it's a really good segue into the topic that I want to talk to you about this week, which is intuitive parenting in general. And I actually started using the term intuitive parenting after my own personal work with intuitive eating. So I'm actually going to talk about intuitive eating and then I'll talk about intuitive parenting. So my confession for you this week is something I don't think I've I'm trying to think, but I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast before, but that I have in my past really struggled with compulsive eating or sorry, compulsive dieting. And really just had a very awful, tumultuous relationship with my body and food, probably starting when I was like 4 years old, honestly, watching my mom, and my dad actually, interact around food and my mom's body and dieting and things like that. And I really, really struggled for a long, long time with, having a decent relationship with my body and not being super sort of like rigid about how I ate and things like that. And perhaps that's a topic for another day, not because I don't want to talk about it today, but because I don't want to get off track with the intuitive parenting stuff. But suffice it to say that one thing that helped me start the ball rolling at getting away from my compulsions around food and dieting was intuitive eating. So intuitive eating's been around for a long time. If you get the book Intuitive Eating, which I highly recommend, just try not to get too hung up on the like pictures of the authors on the back because they are totally like late 80s, early 90s looks. It's kind of like when you are pregnant, I'll always recommend, if you ask me for a book recommendation or something, I'll tell you to read something by Ina May Gaskin. And her book, she's got a couple of books about childbirth, but they were all written in the 70s, like when she's a midwife on like a commune and stuff like that. And the pictures of birth in there are like very 70s. So I always give everyone the caveat. The book is gold. I don't know anything else that's, that's a better book to read when you're pregnant, but also like just know that the women giving birth in those pictures are like full 70s look from top to bottom. So it's the same thing with intuitive eating. If you get the book, you will see what I'm talking about. However, regardless of the hairstyles of the authors at the time of its writing, that book is magic. And it really is one of these crazy things that is like not rocket science, but because we as a society have gotten so far removed from what is perfectly normal and natural and like not rocket science, it can be brain breaking for people. So basically, intuitive eating is based on the idea that like human beings, when we are born, we have a perfectly intact and corrupted mind body connection. It's already built in. And so, we know when we're hungry, we know when we're full, we know what tastes good to us, we know what doesn't taste good to us. We know what makes us feel good when we eat it, we know what makes us feel sick when we eat it. We are able to assess those things and respond to that information and listen to our body's cues and all of that stuff. And then, over time, the world kind of gets in the way. If for totally normal, healthy reasons and for some really messed up reasons. Like, for example, like a newborn baby doesn't know that you eat at night, don't eat at night, and you eat during the day. They don't have those like sort of circadian rhythms established quite yet. And so they're hungry at 2 in the morning, they eat at 2 in the morning. And that's correct. We know that now. That's not what people were told a couple generations ago. But nowadays, most people get really sound advice when they first have a baby, which is you feed on demand. Your baby's hungry, you feed your baby. Once they get older, we start to, learn how to, well, feed them lots during the day and feed them less at night. We give them signals that nighttime is the time for sleeping and daytime is the time for eating. And, so that's a really great example of a perfectly normal, natural, healthy, appropriate way that we sort of like influence the mind body connection in a baby or in a new human. And then there's like obviously really messed up ways that we interrupt that intuitive connection that kids have with their bodies, like saying like, oh, you're not allowed to leave the table until your plate's clean, or are you going to the refrigerator again? You just ate 10 minutes ago, or whatever, you have to eat these vegetables, or whatever. And a lot of that stuff is coming from great intentions on the part of the parents, but the actual messaging that we're giving our kids is not actually great for them. It really interrupts their body autonomy, their ability to understand what their body is thinking and telling them and needs, all of those things. And if this is true for all people in America, but especially women, I haven't met a woman yet in America who hasn't received messages, even if it was just from like a magazine or a billboard or a TV commercial, about what their body is supposed to look like, what kind of foods they're supposed to eat, what it means if they look a different way or eat a different way. We have all been, brainwashed with that stuff, so that it is perfectly normal for an adult woman or an adult person, doesn't have to be a woman, for an adult to be, going about their day and feeling hungry, like feel the pang of hunger. And instead of thinking, oh, I better eat something, I'm hungry, they look at their watch to see if it's time to be hungry right now. That was for me, my personal experience of realizing like, oh my God, I am so beyond messed up right now. I want to do something about this. I was in a therapy session actually, coincidentally talking to my therapist about the diet that I was on at the time. And mid session, I just felt so hungry. And what I did when I felt hungry was I looked at the clock because I wasn't allowed to eat again until 2 o'clock and it was only 12:30. So it wasn't, I'm hungry, I need to eat. It's, I'm hungry and I'm not allowed to be hungry yet. And these are very mild examples of the contorted ways that humans can absolutely lose their connection between mind and body and then not be able to really honor the cues and the messaging that is being given to them. Intuitive eating basically says that connection is still in you somewhere. And what we need to do to get you back to that is to remove all of this stinking thinking that's getting in the way of you not listening. So it's not that your body's not telling you what's going on. Like when I was in that therapy session, my body was telling me it's time to eat. I'm hungry. But I had trained myself for decades at that time to basically plug my ears and go, la, 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 I'm not listening to you every time my body tried to tell me something. So intuitive eating basically says like if we can remove the stinking thinking that is leading you to plug your ears and ignore your body, that messaging is still in there. And your body knows how to take care of itself. Your body knows like not to eat an entire chocolate cake. And your body knows that like when you need vegetables or you're not going to feel totally great and you're probably going to be a little stopped up. Your body knows that and your body tells you that. And believe it or not, when there are no rules about food, when there are no external corruption going on between your mind and your body, you actually will want to eat a vegetable. Not because you're supposed to, not because a doctor told you to, not because you're constipated, but because your body will crave the food that it needs. And when I have talked about this idea with people before, it is met with such incredulity. It's, I mean, the reaction of a class to being introduced to intuitive eating could be an entire semester of like an anthropology course. It is fascinating. And I once taught a class that was a combination of intuitive eating for the parent, but also using that approach in helping kids with food. And the resistance that came from the idea of not having pretty strict rules about what foods were available to kids and how much they could eat, and sort of like the reward and punishment system set up around food in most families. Like it was flabbergasting. So all of that is to introduce not intuitive eating to you necessarily, but intuitive parenting to you. Intuitive parenting is basically the similar concept. Your ability to attune to your child and respond well to their needs and honor their needs and give them the responses that they need to to level up and learn things and grow into the amazing humans that they have the potential to become. That ability is inside of us already. We're already human beings that have the capacity for empathy and attunement and healthy relationship inside of us. But we have been quote unquote corrupted throughout our lives by messaging that gets in the way. It's all that stinking thinking that leads us to like plug our ears and say, la, 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 I'm not listening, and parent in ways that actually aren't helpful to our kids and aren't effective either, because we can't hear the messages that are like that our person is giving us, meaning our person ourselves and our person our child. Those messages are being sent, they are not being received. And so the work of coaching, or the work of working with a therapist, or the work of even just reading a parenting book or a self-help book or something like that, is the work of slowly and gently pulling our fingers out of our ears and paying attention and learning and listening and responding without all of the noise. And I'll give you an example from my early parenthood that was me finally pulling the fingers out of my ears and listening to my gut. So I had my first kid. I didn't really have any friends with kids. I had one friend with a kid, but she lived far away from me. I'm the oldest of my siblings, oldest of all of my cousins, oldest of all of my siblings in law. So I had no nieces or nephews, nothing like that. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no family that lived nearby, etc. But I was told by all of the super helpful people that give you unsolicited advice when you're pregnant that like the worst thing you could ever do is let your baby sleep in your bed with you. Because, let your kid sleep in your bed, you're never going to get him out of there. You're going to have like a 15-year-old sleeping in bed with you because, they're going to get too spoiled. And also with a baby, if you sleep in the bed with the baby, you could like roll over on it and smother it. And that would be the end of your baby, or hurt your baby or something like that. So the worst possible thing you could ever do is let your baby sleep in your bed. And I totally believe that. And not only did I believe that, but I was also told like you should sleep train your baby right from the beginning. When I first had my first kid, there was a book that came out called Baby Wise, that very quickly was like debunked, and like even like the American Academy of Pediatrics was like, do not use this book. But I read it because somebody else told me that it was amazing and it got their kid to sleep through the night right away. And I was exhausted, and I read the book and all this good stuff. So I not only did Elijah not sleep in my bed, he didn't sleep in my room. He slept in a room down the hall from me. And it was horrible. Like, first of all, I had to feed him, in the very beginning, like 3, 4 times a night. So instead of me just like kind of like sitting up in bed and nursing my baby or feeding my baby, I had to like get up, walk down the hall, pick him up from his bed. I wouldn't take him in my room because that was a no-no. So I would sit with him in a chair in his room and nurse him and then put him back to bed and then come back to my bed and then get maybe like an hour of sleep and then do it all over again. I was on the brink of insanity. There's a reason why sleep deprivation is a form of torture. It makes you insane. And it was horrible. And also, Elijah didn't sleep well. He was just a really fussy baby and I was a fussy mommy and I remember talking to that one friend I knew who had a kid but lived far away and I was like, parenting is just so annoying. Like it's like all the stuff that you have to that your kid needs you to do, like all the stuff that is being a good parent is basically doing the opposite of what would feel easy and straightforward to do. Like it would just be so much easier to sleep with Elijah in bed with me than to take him down the hallway. But at that time, I literally said out loud, like all of the instincts that I have are telling me to do the things that are bad. So I can't follow any of my instincts about parenting. I need to like do the sleep training thing instead of co-sleeping, for example, and all of these things. And that's what I did. And it sucked. And then you know, maybe like a year later or something like that, one of my friends had her first kid, but she did it totally different than I did. Like she had a home birth and she was doing all of this stuff. I didn't really even know that stuff that she was doing. I knew she had a home birth, but I didn't know anything else about her parenting approach. But, maybe like 6 weeks after the baby was born, when they were like ready to socialize again and stuff like that, we had them over for dinner. And I was ready to be hosting like someone in her pajamas with like gum stuck in her hair and hadn't brushed her teeth in 3 days and like bleary eyed and, just some zombie that would walk through my front door and like thrust a baby into my arms and be like, oh my God, I need a break. And she came over and she was the most bright-eyed, bushy-tailed bitch. I was like, what the hell? It's just like, God damn it. And I was like, why aren't you tired? And at first I was like, oh, you must be so tired. You look great. I'm so impressed, but I'm sure you're exhausted, and she was like, no, I'm really like she and her husband both looked at each other and were like, no, really? I mean, it's not been that bad. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, um, we're co-sleeping with him. And so he eats like every, 2 or 3 hours, but I don't really even wake up. Like I just wake up for like maybe like a minute to like get him latched on and then we all go back to sleep and it's fine. So I'm really still, and then I sleep in the morning because I'm not working and I take a nap in the afternoons. And so really I'm getting probably maybe even more sleep than I did before, I stopped working and had the baby. And I was just like, you bitch. I was just like, holy shit. I remember turning to Mike and being like, the next baby we have, we're doing that. This is crazy, and I never look back. I've had 4 children and I co-slept with all of the 3 that besides Elijah, and it literally changed my life. But that is such a great example of me not giving myself permission to parent intuitively. Like I had the intuition that I wanted to sleep with Elijah. I had the intuition that this would work better for our family. And I consciously decided that I wasn't allowed to listen to that intuition. Now, I'm not saying that co-sleeping is what every single person should do and everyone's intuition is telling them to co-sleep. That's not the case at all. But all of us do have intuition. All of us do have some sort of voice inside of us that is telling us, like, my gut says this is probably the right way to go. And it is hard to listen to that. in those little moments for me personally where I did listen to it and it worked out better, that really helped me and strengthened me to start honoring those voices. But the true thing that has helped me become so much more intuitive in my parenting is my own personal work, which you heard me talk about last week. The more that I have learned to pull my fingers out of my ears and listen, the easier it has become for me to just parent intuitively with my kids without being like, and don't get me wrong, the noise is still there. There still is the temptation to, plug my ears or whatever. I mean, I even get it for my own kids. Like they see me parenting one of their siblings different than I parented them. And it's, you never would have let that fly when I was a kid, mom, or, how could you have, let him get away with that? Or how come this person got a phone when they were this age and I got a phone when I was that age? And, there's that whole like fairness little noise that could come into your ears and drown out the sound of your own intuition. There's the noise from well-meaning people giving you advice about co-sleeping in my case that can drown out that intuitive voice. There's even books. I mean, shit, it could even be me. You could be listening to this podcast and hearing all this messaging from me that's getting in the way. It's noise in your ears that's getting in the way of you listening to your own intuition. That could be happening. Like I might not be aligned with what your intuition is telling you. And so listening to me might actually wind up leading you astray. That's a real thing, or books out there, or classes you take, or teachers, or social conventions, or your mother-in-law, like all of the things. There's so much noise that makes it so hard sometimes to listen to the inner voice, that intuition that tells you, my kid is not going to do well at this school. I really don't give a shit if everyone else thinks it's the best school on the planet. Or I literally moved to this freaking school district because I heard the school was great. Hard to listen to that voice when there's so much noise telling us not to. Or that little voice that says, you know what? I know that my other kids were ready for summer camp when they were, 7 years old. I just know this kid is not ready, or one of the example I gave last week was about swim lessons, right? Yeah, lots of other kids could swim before Sky did, and he wasn't ready. He wasn't ready. So think about that sort of like idea of gently and slowly removing your fingers from your ears and being able to listen to that inner voice inside that is telling you something, whatever it's telling you right now. And if you need help doing that, I am a professional finger from ear extractor. It is my job to point out that places where your gut is talking to you and you might not be able to even realize that that's what you're hearing. I was facilitating at a coach training a few weeks ago, and I heard the lead trainer say something to a student that I was like, that is gold. And she was like, one of the reasons why we reflect back to our clients what they're telling us is because just because they said it doesn't mean they heard it. Just because your client says, gosh, I really wish I could go on vacation, but I'm so busy and this thing just came up at work and blah, 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 and my husband will be mad at me and blah, 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 doesn't mean they heard the one part of that sentence, which was their gut saying, I need to go on a vacation. And saying it back to your client saying, you know what? It sounds like you know what you need, which is to go on vacation. That was the first thing you said. What do you think about that? Is a really helpful thing to do. We reflect back to our clients because just because your intuition is talking doesn't mean you're listening. And even when your intuition is talking out loud so somebody else can hear it, doesn't mean you're listening. And that's what a coach does, is help you realize that you already have the answers to your questions inside of you. They've been presenting themselves to you as much as they possibly can all along. And we systematically, gradually, step by step, patiently and lovingly remove all of the things that are drowning out the sound of your inner guidance so that you can decide what you want to do. about whatever situation you're in, parenting or otherwise. And I want to tell you that parenting from your intuition is the easiest, most relaxing, most freeing experience I have ever had. I have never felt more aligned with myself, more connected to another human being, more totally satisfied and confident in the future as I have in my relationships with my children. And it is because I am just showing up without any agenda, without any judgment. Now, I don't want to give you the impression I'm doing this all the time. Like, of course, I'm a human being. I have an ego. I am not deaf to the cacophony of messaging around me. And of course, there are times when I go from that easeful, effortless, natural, organic state with my children into angst and worry and control and agenda and trying to, sort of make an outcome happen. And of course, that happens. But when I am in that organic, intuitive space, you can't imagine, you cannot imagine how easy parenting is. It really is. And that is probably I'm probably now the person that when I enter the room, someone in there is going, you fucking bitch, like I am struggling over here. How dare you come in here with a smile on your face and no weight on your shoulders? And I totally get it because I've been there. I've been there before. I'll be there again. But it is possible for me to spend huge swaths of time, weeks even, months even, in a state of just like parenting, schmarenting. It's all good. And that all comes from the work that I've done on myself to remove those burdens, to remove that, noise that gets in the way of me just kind of following what my gut says is the next right step. So if that feels appealing to you, if like easy, effortless, connected, satisfying parenting is interesting to you, I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. Why aren't we talking? That's a real honest question. Why haven't we talked yet? And when you answer that question, hopefully the answer is, wait a minute, there's no good reason why we haven't talked yet. And you click on that link that you get every week when you listen to the podcast that gives you a chance to talk to me for free and tell me all about this and let me give you some helpful hints and feedback that can help you get started on all this stuff. I can't wait to talk to you again next week. I hope you follow your gut and it leads you right back here to the podcast next Wednesday. Bye, everybody.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.